Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Ulster Society Charity and Not-for-Profit Group webinar dealing with stress, burnout and managing mental health. My name is Angela Cregan. I am partner here in Hardens Mulholland Accountancy Practice in Belfast. I also sit on main committee of the Ulster Society and I'm a member of the Charity and Not-for-Profit Group within the Ulster Society. I am also a treasurer of Action Mental Health and have been involved with the charity for a number of years, and I've been able to see and benefit, I suppose, in a lot of the work that they've been doing over the several years. So I'm delighted that we will have two speakers from Action Mental Health today. The Chief Executive, David Babington, has joined us. David has been in the Chief Executive role since 2010 and has facilitated a lot of change across public sector and the not-for-profit sector. David is very passionate about the mental health sector and has been trying to get some unification and get organisations together to try and make the shared goals and give the clients the services that they need. David will tell us a little about Action Mental Health and the services that they provide, and will also touch on some of the challenges being faced by the sector as a whole. We will then be joined by Rachael Power, who is a manager of AMH Works within Action Mental Health. Rachael will take us through some of the tips around mental health, some of the languages that really should be used when dealing with mental health within our organisations, and some of the conversations that we will be having with colleagues. She will also touch on some of those signs of burnout and other stress and how to deal with those things going through. So I hope we'll all get something from the presentations today. I know certainly I am looking forward to it. If there are any questions throughout, please feel free to pop those into the chat box, and there will be an opportunity for questions then at the end. So if you pop those in throughout, you don't have to wait to the end, and we can deal with those then once we come to the end of the presentations. So without further ado, I would like to invite on David Babington. Welcome, David.
Thank you, Angela. Delighted to be here. Thank you for inviting myself and also my colleague Rachael, who everyone's going to hear from shortly. And I'm very grateful to Chartered Accountants Ireland for inviting us here to talk about something which me and Rachael and all our colleagues in Action Mental Health feel really passionate about, which is the whole issue of mental health. I'm going to share some slides now, and bear with me, I'll just bring them up and I'll go through them. I'm really, I suppose, best way to describe it is I'm probably the hors d'oeuvre before the main meal. So I'm just going to talk briefly for about 10 minutes before Rachael talks. And Rachael is going to talk all about the issues of mental health in the workplace, how to build resilience, how to prevent workout, etc. And I'm just going to go through some more general points, as Angela said there. So I'm going to talk about the issue of Action Mental Health, but also the main issue of mental health across the piece in terms of Northern Ireland, how we're dealing with it or not. So I hope you can see my slides now. And if so, I'll proceed now. So I'm starting with the first slide there, which I make no apologies for, is in black and white. I suppose every organisation has got its little history and its story. And for Action Mental Health, strangely, that started in a lunatic asylum. We are a mental health organisation, but 150 years ago, the Down Lunatic Asylum was built. And our clients were people who were in that lunatic asylum. And what we tried to do was get them out of it. And they were doing such as things you can see here, working in the local community, helping out in various gardens. And there you can see helping out with one of the local employers. And that's the asylum there, now more commonly referred to as the Downshire Hospital in Downpatrick. And there's various activities then that we got the people who are in there, basically incarcerated in there, in some cases for life, and to get out into the community. And indeed, our great strength is being able to help these people get back out, not away from the asylum as it was then, or the hospital, but also right back into society and really building social inclusion.
David, sorry, I think they're not in presentation mode. Apologies. Sorry, we're just adjusting the slide into presentation mode.
There we go. I hope that's okay.
I'm not sure.
That's great, David. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. Hopefully everybody saw those two first slides. In terms of just turning to the here and now, that was the little history and the story of Action Mental Health. And this is where we are now, just one slide giving you some of the stats. We're basically a recovery organisation helping those people who have mental health issues, about 1,500 of them recover from them. We also deliver counselling, resilience. We're out in schools, we're out in the community. We're covering various programmes in a third of schools in Northern Ireland, that's primary schools and secondary schools, and basically raising awareness of the whole issue of mental health, and particularly not just here on the island of Ireland, but also further afield. And as you can see, we're across the whole region. We do a little bit of cross-border work, I'll talk about in a minute, and we very much take quality as being embedded and being a core part of our offer. And so IAP Platinum, in fact, they're IAP Platinum Awards tonight in London, and very hopefully we'll win UK Employer of the Year at Platinum level for that. In terms of the types of projects we deliver, this is just an example of one of them. And I say this is a cross-border one, and this is a Peace 4 program currently underway with 7 partners, and we're delivering there for young people. And the outcomes range for those over 30,000 young people being touched by our programs and being helped to build their resilience. It's very much in line with the principles of what Rachel's going to be talking about building resilience in the workplace and letting people giving people the skills to be able to cope with life's ups and downs. In terms of the challenges regionally, just moving away from Action Mental Health and our programs, I've tried to put in some statistics here and a few figures about financial figures as well. And knowing you're all accountants, I know you'd be interested in those. Certainly, sadly, Northern Ireland hasn't got a pretty history. We've got the highest prevalence of mental health issues. We've got a lot of issues with respect to the troubles in terms of traumatic history. Anxiety and depression is higher here, particularly in younger people, which is a real concern for our next generation. And the resources to deal with those issues is substantially less than in England. Indeed, we've had a historic underspending for a generation here in Northern Ireland. And what really is galling, I suppose, for our sector and for all of us really as a society is that England and Ireland are investing even more now. Ireland made its single largest investment in mental health services, £72 million only 2 months ago, and we're still falling behind. And of course, the penultimate point there about 70% of Northern Ireland workers feel under pressure at work as well, that still stands, particularly with respect to the cost of living and having come out of COVID as well. And that's something which Rachel will be touching on in a minute. So how are we responding as a region to that? We're doing all sorts of research. We have been doing all sorts of research with Queen's and Ulster University, getting the data. We've held summits. We've been to Westminster as well. Remember, in 2017 and 2020, there was no Northern Ireland executive. So we as an organisation went there with others to talk with the powers that be who were in power there at Westminster to try and get some movement. And I'm delighted to say we now have the establishment of the mental health champion. You may have heard of Professor Siobhan O'Neill. She's been a lecturer up at the University of Ulster, up in the northwest, and she's now taken up this ministerial appointment. And the amazing thing is that she has got such good evidence about what works, what doesn't work from her university career, but also now she's someone who's extremely good at speaking out and connecting people as well. And that's making such a difference in joining up everyone in society in terms of understanding what the issues are, but also joining all of us up as the providers to make sure we're trying to make a real difference and not duplicating all the work that we're hoping to do. And in terms of the other positive notes, having painted a rather dim picture, we've had the champion in place now for a year. We've also got the approval of a 10-year mental health strategy. And Robin Swan, as the minister, well, he was the minister up until recently, launched this new strategy and got it approved, which is fantastic news, because the first time Northern Ireland has had a comprehensive mental health strategy. And that's a strategy vision, really trying to make sure that it covers all society and not particular parts of it, and make sure there's equity of access and make sure it breaks down barriers and tackles all sorts of issues out there in our communities, which are all things like finance and debts, human rights as well, and very all-encompassing and actually very ambitious, which is exactly what Northern Ireland needed, having had the underfunding for so long. The big issue with it is the funding. We all know we're in dire straits, and the funding of 1.2 billion for that strategy is in doubt. The first year of the strategy is this year, and there was £9 million supposed to be allocated. We only reached a third of that, just under £3 million. So there'll be great concerns. So although our expectations have been raised, and to give all of you the reassurance that mental health is being taken seriously, actually the delivery to make sure that things happen across society, particularly in workplaces as well, and actually that is still in doubt because we don't have the resources to change that. So I'll now pause and pass over to Rachel, and she'll talk now more about the aspects of going on in the workplace, which would be more relevant to yourselves.
Afternoon, everybody. As David has said, thank you so much for the invite for us to come and speak to you. And David has given you some background information about our organisation and also the wider context of how mental health is being provided for across Northern Ireland. I'm going to talk a little bit more specifically about mental health in the workplace and also about burnout and rest, because burnout is something that we certainly are our clients. So AMH Works, we deliver training and offer consultancy to organisations for the health and wellbeing of their employees. And burnout, we have a course specifically around burnout and rest because of the high demand of companies coming to us and saying, we're worried about our staff getting burnt out. Can you provide any information and training around this? But if you just bear with me while I get my presentation up. Hopefully you can all see that. So mental health can be quite an evocative word, and very often when we hear the term mental health, what we're really thinking about is mental ill health. And the definition from the World Health Organization of mental health is a state of well-being in which everyone can recognize their own potential. They can cope with the normal stresses of life and can work productively and fruitfully and able to make a contribution to their community. So it's really about being able to thrive in our lives. Yes, there's going to be pressures. Yes, there's going to be things that can cause some stress, but to try and manage that, we can keep that stress to a healthy level. And when it talks about making a contribution to your community, that can be your workplace. So your mental health is tied into your workplace, and employers do have a duty of care towards their employees and their mental health and well-being. And again, very often when we hear the term mental health, we can think of it as a very fixed idea that you have bad mental health, whereas really mental health is the same as physical health. It's a spectrum. We can move across from the green to the red. Sometimes over a long period of time, different stressors or different things that happen in our lives, we can move into the orange and the red, sometimes without even realizing. And then sometimes there'll be days when you can move across the spectrum, just depending on what you're going through, but it's not fixed. The same as our physical health, we can get medication or strategies and tools that help us stay as mentally healthy as we can. And this is the same for all of us. We're all in the same boat. We all have mental health, and sometimes we're in good mental health, and sometimes we move down and towards poor mental health. Another helpful kind of visual that we use a lot when we're speaking to people in the workplace is this continuum, because very often mental health isn't really spoken about in the workplace. So you could be sitting beside somebody and have no idea what they're going through. Maybe they're on medication, maybe they have a diagnosis. We don't know, but they're still coming to work. They're still thriving. They have the support in place that is allowing them to thrive within and make a contribution to their community. So this continuum is just a good visual to think about how we could all be different, experiencing different things. We might not know what our colleagues are going through, but we are still able to make a contribution. So if you look at the top right-hand corner, a person with no mental illness or disorder and positive mental health. Then below it, a person with no diagnosed mental illness or disorder, but who has poor mental health. Over to the left, a person with a diagnosis of a serious mental illness and who has poor mental health. And then above it, a person with a diagnosis, but who copes well and has positive mental health. So again, just trying to remove the stigma around hearing that somebody has poor mental health or has depression or a personality disorder, or it's not a fixed thing. They can move across all four quadrants of this continuum. And you may not know about it, but it doesn't mean that somebody who has poor mental health and no diagnosis, they can still come to work, contribute. There may be a change in their behaviour compared to when they were in the quadrant above, but they can still be able to do their job well. So some of your colleagues, some of your teams, some of you might have a personal experience, like myself. of having been in all 4 of these quadrants. And again, we're always trying to work at removing the stigma, especially within the workplace, around mental health and around that you can have a diagnosis or be on medication or receiving support, but still really thriving and making a contribution to your workplace. And as I've said, we are trying to work towards physical health and mental health being viewed as the same. And one thing about physical health is we're all really happy to talk about our physical health. You know, if you're back in the office, it might be a common topic during tea break or, you know, around the stereotypical water cooler. Everybody's happy to talk about the terrible cold they've had, or the kids all have had a bug, or the flu that's going around, or of course when COVID, you know, we're still all talking about that. So it's a topic of small talk, very common. And a lot of it is because it's all really relatable. We know what the responses should be when somebody says, I'm full of the cold. So we're generally happy to talk about it. Even some of the more serious illnesses, we still have a bit of a shared language, a shared script around what responses we expect people to say. And there's very little stigma when we are talking about our physical health. Because again, we all recognize that we all have physical health, and it's something, again, that we deal with and that we are very happy to talk about. And a lot of that is because we know the right words to say. We know what the common cold is. We know what a flu is, or chicken pox, or shingles, or any of these kind of common medical things that we might all be dealing with. Whenever they're talked about, we know what they are, so we feel comfortable talking about it. Whereas with mental health, there is a lot of stigma, and a lot of that is around not knowing exactly what do you mean when somebody says anxiety or depression. There's a lot of stereotypes around mental health, and that stigma of we're not sure what it means, we're not sure, so we don't want to say the wrong thing to a colleague, we don't want to maybe upset them, or we don't want to have an uncomfortable, awkward conversation during our 10-minute tea break. So these are some of the reasons why we don't talk about our mental health, because we don't want to put people in a position where they feel uncomfortable, but also we don't want to talk about our own mental health because we don't want people maybe thinking differently about us. We don't want them thinking, oh, well, I don't want her on my team. You know, if she's got anxiety, she'll not be able to perform well. She'll not be able to handle this bigger project. So that stigma, especially in the workplace where it can feel like it could be detrimental to our career, then we aren't going to be as open to freely share how we are doing, how our mental health is. Another aspect is we all have our own frame of reference of what mental health or mental ill health is. So whenever we hear that term, the kind of images or ideas that come into your mind subconsciously, that's your frame of reference. And that could be negative, that could be positive, that could be neutral. And there'd be lots of things that have fed into this frame of reference. So it could be our own experiences, could be what we see on TV, films, social media, that all creates this frame of reference. And it may be that we need to change our frame of reference. So we need to learn more about, well, what actually is mental health? Do I have a negative view towards it? Do I need to challenge that? Do I need to look at that? But just being aware of our own frame of reference whenever this topic comes up. And of course, within the context of an office, we don't want to upset our colleagues. We don't want to, if somebody does say, oh, I'm feeling a bit down, or, oh, I'm a bit anxious about such and such, we maybe don't want to pursue that conversation because, oh, I don't want to upset them. I don't want to make them cry in the office. Oh, they'd be so mortified, or I'd be mortified. And these are all very natural responses. But a lot of it comes down to the fact that we don't have a shared language around mental health. If I turned to my colleague and said, my anxiety is really bad this week, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z to try and pull myself out of it, we're not sure how that colleague would respond. So that's a very vulnerable thing for somebody to do, to offer up that information, not knowing how they'll respond. And again, it's because we don't have that script of, oh, I know what to say, or, okay, yes, I find this relatable, or I have experience of it too. It's a very vulnerable and very personal thing to talk about. But an excellent first step in creating a shared language is making sure within an organisation that everybody has had some kind of mental health awareness training or well-being training, so that people within the organisation who are maybe suffering their mental health, they are in mental ill health, that they know, okay, if I go and speak to my manager, I know that they've had that training. I know that they know what depression is. So that removes some of the onus on the person to have to explain, which could absolutely put people off talking about their mental health more openly. Yeah, so that we want to see organisations working towards creating a more positive culture. And again, that's really from across all levels of the organisation. We work with a lot of companies, and very often it is that they'll maybe run several mental health awareness sessions because they recognise we need every single chief executive all the way down. We need everybody to have completed this training because we really see the value in it. And it needs to be an investment. The return of investment is very good for organisations when they are investing in the mental health and well-being. Things like reduced long-term sickness, better, more motivated staff, which creates just a much better place to work, and then should also improve or see a good output from the work that they're doing. Again, training staff. And again, not being a tick box exercise, that being something the organisation really believes in, and that it's not just a one-off training session and then nothing else happens, but that staff can see that the organisation is really invested and really cares about their mental health and well-being. Another really vital aspect is an employee assistance programme, which I'm sure most big organisations have, but very often we all claim our dental and opticians and those kind of things, but very often people aren't aware that you can get probably about 6 free counselling sessions through your EAP. And again, counselling doesn't have to be something that is a last resort. We don't have to hit rock bottom before we think about receiving some support. It can be a really proactive thing to do for our own mental health. We all MOT our cars to make sure that they're roadworthy, but we kind of hope that our brains and our mental health, that we just leave it alone and it sorts itself out. Whereas thinking about some proactive counselling sessions can be really beneficial. You don't have to be in the midst of a crisis or something happening. It can just be, no, I want to check in. It could be really, really good self-care, really good investment in myself. So if your organisation can provide that for you through an EAP, brilliant, and it would such a great thing to make use of. And then finally, thinking about organisationally what they can do is making sure that if organisations are investing and are putting in place policies and strategies around mental health and well-being, that they are being properly implemented, that it isn't that they're really backing it, so that employees can see, well, there is real meaning and integrity behind this decision that the organisation has done, because they recognise that the mental health and well-being of their staff is so important. And we all can play a part within our organisations to work towards creating this positive culture, because it won't happen overnight. And it may just be being more open with our conversations with our colleagues and with our team members, encouraging people to access the EAP, encouraging people to access training that's put on. So we all have a part to play in this wider picture of creating a positive culture. And as I kind of referenced at the beginning, whenever we were meeting with Angela and the rest of the team, something that they highlighted was around burnout. And again, as I said, we created this training about this time last year, coming out of COVID and back to the office and those kind of pressures. And now we find ourselves a year on, and those pressures have just really been compounded and more things added. And we can't, as much as burnout is related specifically to the workplace, So the definition here from the World Health Organization is burnout is a psychological syndrome occurring from prolonged chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. We don't separate our mental health when we come to work and when we leave work. Our working life and our home life, it's all just our life. And our mental health, we take it with us, the same as our physical health. We take it with us to our job and we bring it back home with us again. So as much as burnout is specifically related to the workplace, it doesn't mean to say that issues that we are dealing with in our personal life can't also be an impact on this. But a good kind of visual or analogy to think of for burnout or for stress in general is a balloon. So for a balloon to fulfill its balloon purpose, it has to be filled with air. It needs something to fill it up. And it's the same for ourselves. We do need kind of boundaries and pressures and a bit of stressors, the likes of today, making sure you were here, logged on at 1 o'clock, getting up for work in the morning, getting kids out to school, deadlines. Those are all good kind of pressures that we need. And it's similar to a balloon. We need that to inflate the balloon. But it's whenever those pressures turn from good kind of stressors to just more and more being packed in, more and more air going into the balloon and nothing being released. That's when we can really see burnout happening. And there's a couple of different stages around burnout. And of course, a really good way of avoiding burnout is being aware of those stages. Now, they might look different for you, or they might look different for a colleague or people in your team, but being aware of the general kind of stages will hopefully mean that we can spot when either ourselves or somebody in our team, somebody that we manage, is maybe moving towards burnout, and then thinking about some of the ways that we can address that. So how common is burnout? So 1 in 5 said they felt unable to manage the stress and pressure in the workplace, and it increased obviously in 2020 during COVID. And again, top causes, longer working hours, inability to separate work and personal life, as much as it's all our life. And we bring our mental health and our physical health with us. Certainly when we were all working from home, where was the boundary of when you were working in your kitchen, where was the boundary of work and personal life? And then an uncertain job market. And I imagine now in 2022, cost of living crisis will be a big issue for people, and burnout, just the uncertainty of how we're all things worldwide can just give a bit of low level anxiety constantly for everybody, which, as you'll see when we look at the stages of burnout, it can definitely be a cause. 46% of workers feeling more prone to extreme levels of stress. Again, about a year ago of March 2020. So just again, seeing people being more aware that our stress levels are higher. And this is an interesting one. 23% of people knew that their employers had a plan in place to help them avoid chronic stress and burnout. So in some ways it's encouraging that some organisations are prioritising it, but also that whole other 70% that aren't getting that same, don't know what their employees have in place to help them. So looking at different stages of burnout, again, forewarned is forearmed, or whatever that phrase is that I'm not remembering the right way of it, but it's really helpful to have a good idea of what the stages are so we can try and avoid them. So if we think about taking on a new project, it doesn't have to be a new job, but something when we have a bit of spring in our step about something in work, that's the kind of honeymoon period of feeling really committed to the job or project, job satisfaction. It's really energizing you, and that ripples out to other aspects of your job. Your creative juices are flowing, and that's the honeymoon period when we're feeling really happy to have started something new, or just feeling really happy in our job. And then second stage begins when noticing that some days are more difficult than others. Some you might not be as optimistic about things, and your stress might be increasing. And stage 1 and 2, that is real life, isn't it? That there's days when we are feeling brilliant about everything and about work and feeling really passionate about it, and then there'll be days when stressful things happen, And that kind of lowers our positivity. And we're hoping maybe that those days when we're not feeling as positive, that there are fewer of those and more of the days that we're feeling really energized and passionate about our job. But it's whenever we start to see that there's more days when we're not feeling optimistic, when we're not feeling energized about our job, that's maybe when we're moving into stage 3. So, chronic stress, that every day is feeling more and more pessimistic, that your energy is just getting lower and lower, and more. So you might be feeling more intensive aspects of stage 2. So a really helpful thing that we can do, and just about our own self-awareness at the end of a working day, kind of check in with yourself. How was that today? That was mostly fine. Oh, great, that's mostly fine is brilliant. And keeping a bit of a running check of, oh yeah, this week was I had some days were brilliant and some days were mostly fine. Great. And just being aware of that as you're going along, then when you realize, I had 4 days that were very stressful. Okay, what can I do next week to try and make sure that it's only 2 days that were stressful? And again, some of that self-awareness can be really beneficial. Try and avoid progressing into stage 3 or further. So stage 4 is burnout, where the symptoms have become critical. And some of the ways that this can manifest itself is, neglecting your appearance, just not really caring, a very pessimistic outlook on your work specifically. Might get a bit obsessive about, I need to fix this one very small problem. If I fix this, then everything else will be fine. Wanting to withdraw, again, thinking of work life, wanting to withdraw from our colleagues, or, people sensing a change of somebody who was maybe chatty and gregarious in the office, that you can see a noticeable change. And that's really the biggest kind of signifier around burnout, is if some kind of change in their personality. And again, it'll be dependent on the person, but somebody seeing a marked change over a couple of weeks, that is a time when, as managers or as colleagues, as workmates, that is a point when we can say, you haven't been quite yourself the last few weeks. How's everything going? And it may be that they've become burnt out. And then there is a 5th stage to burnout, that it can become habitual, that we start a new project, we very quickly become burnt out, and then we start again and become burnt out, where it just keeps repeating. And obviously, the best thing we can do around burnout is rest. And that sounds a bit counterintuitive, talking about rest within our working day. But a way to think about it is maybe being more boundaried. And that can be a really good way of ensuring that we include some moments of respite within our day. So some physical things. If you have occupational health or those kind of things within your organisation, things like if you've been looking at your screen for, I can't remember now, is it every 20 minutes you should be looking away for 20 seconds. But those physical things, making sure that we do get up and walk around every couple of hours, maybe looking at boundaries around, okay, I answer emails for the first 2 hours of the day, and then the rest of the day I do my actual work. Have a friend, and she says her emails were just constantly, the notifications were going all the time, that then she was hearing the tone in her sleep. So she had to do something about this constant stream of emails, because she wasn't getting to her own work. So that can be an aspect of resting, putting some boundaries in place. And this, another big one that sometimes we're all guilty of not taking a lunch break, working on through a big piece of work or a deadline, and then next thing you know, it's 3:30 and you're like, well, lunchtime's been and gone. There's no point taking one now. A really good way of resting in the day is taking your lunch break, getting out for a walk, or having a chat with somebody, just really removing yourself from your desk, and letting your brain rest, letting your brain think about something else, as well as nourishing yourself physically by having lunch. It's really good for for your mental health as well. And things like do some breathing exercises across the day that only take like 3 minutes if you're making a cup of tea. Try and have little touch points that you can attach a breathing exercise to. So if you make a cup of tea every couple of hours, okay, well, I'm going to do some deep breathing while the kettle's boiling, or I'm going to watch 3-minute mindfulness video while the kettle's boiling, to try and stack up our habits so that it doesn't feel like, I have to try and avoid burnout. I have to schedule in mindfulness and meditation, and that's another thing, and that's going to stress me out. So we're trying to add these things into our existing schedules so that they do actually work for us. Because I can tell you lots of strategies and lots of tools, but it's figuring out what works best for you. So as you can see, there are ways that we can kind of encourage some rest in our day-to-day lives within work without having a nap, which we're not encouraging during working time. But it's kind of changing our thinking of, okay, how do I prioritize this to make sure that I can thrive for the rest of today, have a good day. Okay, I know that I have stressful meetings tomorrow. I know that there's going to be stressful things happen. Or, of course, the unexpected things happening all the time within our workplaces. How can I make sure to prioritize myself so that I can bring my best to the work then that I have to do? So as much as it sounds a bit odd to be talking about rest within the workplace, hopefully you get a bit of an idea of how it can be incorporated. And whenever we are delivering any kind of training to organisations, we want to leave people with something that they can take away and use straight away. Sometimes, especially in face-to-face training, we will do a few minutes of mindfulness and we'll all do it together, which can be a really lovely experience of, a room of 20 people just taking that break, and all of us, especially at the end of a session, we've learned all these things about mental health, and then we want to give people time to not only let all that sink in slightly, but also to give them an opportunity to practice some of the things that we've talked about. So within this kind of webinar format, I thought I would share a tool, and it may be that it doesn't work for you. It might be that it works for somebody in your team, or you could suggest it to somebody that you work with and they might find it really helpful. So it's CIA, Control, Influence and Accept. So it's some of you may have come across it, problem solving, stress management tool, and it helps us think about how we can respond to unexpected challenges that happen to us in our working life, or stressful situations that happen during the day in our day-to-day lives. So control, identify the issue or elements in the situation that you can control. Very often, the only thing that we can control in some of these situations is ourselves and how we react, how we respond. Influence, identify the elements that you can't control, but you can influence. And then finally, accept. Identify the things that are just outside of your control, and adjust accordingly. And sometimes just freeing ourselves from that idea of trying to control absolutely everything, especially in a workplace environment, that there are things that happen that we haven't been able to influence, we haven't been able to control. We might have to deal with them, and now the thing that we can control is how we react or how we respond to this, to what has happened. And sometimes just being able to take that, very few seconds of thinking, CIA, okay, I can control how I respond to this. I can respond to this in a calmer manner, because I know that that's the best thing for me, and the best thing probably for the circumstances. And something that can also be very handy, especially when we're thinking of that spectrum that I shared at the beginning. If we are kind of in the amber kind of zone, it can be really difficult to remember, like, what tool do I use? What strategy? How do I help myself regulate, or how do I help myself calm down if I am starting to feel myself stressed? So what I sometimes do, will write 3 things that I know help me calm down or help reduce my anxiety, and I'll stick them somewhere I can see them on my laptop or on the desk or somewhere, so that if I feel a bit stressed or feel my anxiety rising, my brain then doesn't have to scramble around to think, oh, how do I make this better? I look at my post-it note and I think, yes, I'm going to go and drink a full glass of water, and that I know that's one thing that helps me calm down. And it'll be very different for everybody, but having something visual somewhere that, you know, when push comes to shove and I'm in the thick of something, my brain doesn't have to worry about that. I have it written down and I can choose one of those things and know that that will hopefully help me regulate, help me then think of what can I control, what's out of my control, and then deal with the situation in front of you. And again, something that we always finish off our sessions with is around signposting. So again, this could be information for you or information that is good to have at hand, dealing with if you're managing people or working within teams. It's always good to have as much information as possible. So of course, the GP is always a good first port of call, or for some of the more immediate situations, things like Lifeline, Samaritans, the numbers are there. But then also voluntary organisations like ourselves, other mental health charities, or more specific organisations. And a really handy app is the Here to Help app, which is the red kind of icon on this slide. And that's a really handy app that can provide information for an immediate situation. So it can bring you straight to phone emergency services, Samaritans, Lifeline, or it can be providing more specific help, and it's all categorized so you can search through and find who's available in your area. So it's a very handy little tool to have. And of course, AMH is here as an organisation that can offer training and consultancy to workplaces and to make sure that we're all doing our best to look after our employees within the workplace. If you'd like more information about that, I know there's time for question and answers now, but please feel free to take my email address, drop me a line if you'd like to discuss anything further. And thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. And yeah, I'm looking forward to if you have any questions.
Thank you very much, Rachael. That was great. Lots of takeaways from that. Now, I am glad that you're not encouraging naps in the workplace. Thank you very much for that. But no, I know it can be helpful, and certainly myself, I know when you get stuck into a lot of work, sometimes you just need to get away from the desk, but you have to tell yourself to do that. Sometimes it's because my back's telling me it's time to move, but I think it is very important. Though, please, anybody who has any questions directly for David or Rachael, please pop those in the box, and we'd be happy to leave with those. The slides will be shared afterwards as well. If there's anything that anybody maybe is not comfortable, just I suppose putting in the box or would prefer to do it in person, please go ahead and contact David or Rachael. But I mean, I do have a couple of small questions. What I did like, Rachael, was something that you said as well, is sort of thriving in life. I like that concept, let's thrive rather than survive. And I think sometimes we do go into survival mode. So I think it's nice just to have that concept in mind. So could you give us any tips as to, how to start a conversation with a colleague? Say, even if I'm looking at the staff member thinking they look a wee bit, under pressure, or, how do you start that conversation?
Yeah, those can always be, that can be the challenging first step of, how do I get started to have this conversation? And again, we maybe want to avoid it because we don't want to upset somebody, or we think we're overstepping the mark, or it could be something that's happening in their personal life. So it's nothing to do with work. And I don't want to be seen as rude or nosy. But if we notice a colleague or somebody that we manage or somebody that we are working with, if we notice a sustained change in their behaviour or a dramatic change in their behaviour, for example, me, I'm chatty, I'm a bit loud in the office. If I'm suddenly withdrawn, that's a noticeable change that somebody could say, you haven't been yourself the last few days. Just letting you know, if you want to talk, I'm here. So it doesn't even have to be is everything okay? It can just be I've noticed a change, I'm here. And it may be that the person then does open the conversation up and say, actually, yes, this has been happening, or such and such a project is just really stressing me out and I could do with some support, but I don't know who to ask, or want to be seen to be needing extra support. So it may be that they themselves will progress the conversation. So it doesn't have to be a direct, is everything okay? It can just be I've noticed a change, I'm here, and I'm willing to listen. If that seems like an easier way into it. Or if it's somebody that, if you are managing, you could, not in a kind of disciplinarian way, but it could be I've noticed a change in your work, or I've noticed a change in your output. Is anything going on? Can I offer, what support can I offer you, or how can we figure this out together? And I think generally we know ourselves, we do like when people say, how's it going? And you feel like, oh, they actually mean it. Or offer some support and you think, okay, that feels really genuine. So if we come at these conversations from that kind of a place of I'm genuinely interested in how my colleague is or how this person is, I think that comes across. And even if you stumble over the words or you're not quite sure that you've said the right thing, I think the intentions will come through.
Okay. And what happens, Rachel, if the situation actually that seems to be causing the issue is actually external to the workplace? Where does the employer's responsibility fall in that situation?
Yeah, that is a tricky one, because as I was saying, we really can't separate how things outside of work can come in and impact our work. And yeah, that can be a bit of a blurred line, but employers do have a duty of care to their staff, and if an external something in their personal life is impacting them within work, then their employees do have a duty of care to try and put some support in place. So again, it might be an HR issue or something that a manager, some reasonable adjustments. But yeah, it doesn't have to be just an issue that is directly rooted from something at work.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. And David, one for yourself, just if an employee, for example, doesn't know whether their employer offers an EAP, how do they go about finding out?
Well, certainly the employment assistance programs, EAP programs, as Rachel mentioned there, can be really, really helpful. Clearly, one can go online, one can speak to a friend or whatever, and there are a number of EAP providers around in Northern Ireland and across the island of Ireland. I think the key thing there is to do a bit of research, speak to a fellow colleague or speak to the HR department. If you're doing your own research and you're working on your own, then clearly do your own research on this. There are a vast range of providers now, and the key thing is to make sure the quality is there and embedded in terms of the type of support you need. Some of them offer just a digital, a remote option. Others offer the hybrid, so possibly some digital and remote, but also some face-to-face or only just face-to-face. So in our own experience with them, our own counselling is that actually people like the variety and the option to be able to either have face-to-face or to have remote. Interesting enough, clearly during lockdown, we had to go remote. But I think now increasingly with we have a complete counselling service, about 30 counsellors day in, day out counselling. Face-to-face is very much the dominant preference, and most people want to have that face-to-face and see somebody, and they pick up all that non-verbal communication as well more effectively. But for some people, particularly younger people, certainly the remote is more effective. So I suppose just do your research and speak to somebody, particularly speak to a professional like an HR professional first.
Yeah, certainly. No, thank you, David. I think we found that once our team started to come back into the office, actually, you could see some visible signs maybe that people weren't doing so well, but it was harder to see when we all come on the Zoom call in your small town, and it was a bit different. So it's great to see people coming back and the interactions and the young people starting to enjoy, getting together again. So it's been great. So thank you very much for today. I really appreciate it. I think there's some good stuff to take away. We had over 250 people registered, for the session. So it's clearly something that is the forefront of a lot of people's mind, I suppose, either maybe for themselves or tips for themselves or for the wider team. So thank you very much appreciated. We have no question through at the minute, but as I say, if anybody has anything that they want to touch base with the two of you afterwards, I'm sure you'd be more than happy to be in touch. So thank you very much. Really appreciate it.